Now, why? Why is why is XRF testing even an issue? And we say because it's a lead paint case. And folks, when I started doing this in the late 80s, there was affirmative proof of lead for a case to go forward. And it was typically a violation notice, and we have a sample picture of a violation notice. It was typically a violation notice, or there was typically a test at a property that had been done by the health department, but there was proof of lead. It's a lead paint case. Well, the litigation has evolved where we don't always have proof of lead anymore, at least direct proof of lead. And then, as a result, the battleground has really started with circumstantial evidence. And is there enough proof of lead? Does this make sense? Does this fit? Is the presentation of the circumstantial evidence right? Because, again, it's a lead paint case. We need to make sure, at the very least, that there's lead there. Okay, now, we get into situations, however, and particularly in more recent years, where there is not a violation notice. There is not affirmative proof of lead. So, the way that gap is filled typically by our friends on the plaintiff's side, and capably so, is by lead paint testing. And this is a sample test from my friend Scott's office, and through an organization that we often see in the Baltimore area that conducts the testing. And it is a lead paint test. And we could probably argue for 10, 15, 20 minutes, maybe a session, on the significance of this in terms of whether it tests for lead paint hazard or whether just the presence of lead-based paint. We on the defense side contends it just shows lead-based paint somewhere in the property. For years we would get these reports, and everybody would sort of assume that some of the more scientific-based information was valid and on point and was legit, as my kids would say. So particularly like the calibration readings. How was it done? How was calibration done? Are these readings in fact correct? What was the process? Those sorts of issues. And then we start asking, well, who did it? Why were these particular areas tested? Are the readings given as positive actually positive under some legal authority? So we started looking at those because, again, you get a test 10, 15 years after the alleged exposure. You want to make sure it is what it appears to be. So who's involved in terms of the process? XRF tester. What's going to be involved in the XRF testing? And just who's doing it? And this is sort of a threshold consideration as we look at the evidence, as we look at one of these ARC tests. You want to consider what are the qualifications of the tester? And this becomes, and you'll see folks wrapped into or intertwined in all of these issues is, I would argue, as I did about a month ago in a lead paint case where we had motions for several days, that it really depends on what the plaintiffs are trying to say or trying to sell, if you will, and I say that nicely, are trying to sell with this evidence. Are they trying to say that their test will simply prove the presence of lead-based paint at the property? Or are they trying to say that their test, which shows the presence of lead-based paint at the property, establishes that the property was a lead risk hazard? We argue that's a big difference. That's a big difference, and you need to watch your distinctions there. Because whether you prove just simply the presence of lead is one issue. Whether you want to try to tell 6 people in front of a Baltimore City jury that it's a lead risk hazard, that's another story. And we argue that entails a number of different considerations.